The invitation had come unexpectedly. An exclusive, all-expenses-paid couples retreat at a private resort, the kind of place with infinity pools, world-class chefs, and secluded villas where you could forget the real world even existed. It was supposed to be a vacation, a break, a chance to reconnect. That's what our wives had told us, anyway. 8 of us, for couples, friends for years, caught in the predictable routine of marriage, jobs, obligations. We needed this, they had said, a chance to escape, to recharge, to remind ourselves of who we used to be. We had no reason to suspect anything. Not yet. It started small. Little things. A shift in the way the wives acted. Something subtle. Something you wouldn't notice unless you were paying attention. A hesitation in conversation. A glance exchanged between them. An inside joke none of us men seemed to be in on. At first, it felt harmless. Then, the first message arrived. I had just stepped out of the shower, towel around my waist, the sun setting over the horizon in a way that made everything outside glow in deep shades of gold and violet. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. I frowned, picked it up, and read it twice. Do you know where your wife really was last night? A slow, creeping sensation crawled up my spine. I glanced toward the patio, where Emma, my wife of 6 years, was lounging by the pool with the other wives, her face lit up with laughter, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked normal, relaxed, happy, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just been the subject of the most unsettling text I had ever received. I typed back, my fingers suddenly cold against the screen. Who is this? No response. The door opened, and Emma walked in, fresh from the pool, her skin glistening with water, her bikini wrapped in a loose cover-up. She smiled at me, the kind of easy, natural smile that shouldn't belong to a woman with a secret. You coming down for dinner? She asked. I studied her for a second too long, long enough that she noticed. Long enough that something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, or maybe something else. Yeah, I finally said. Just a minute. She lingered in the doorway. You okay? I forced a small smile. Yeah, just tired. She nodded, hesitated, then walked away. The moment she was gone, I checked my phone again. Still no response. But I wasn't letting it go. And I was about to find out that I wasn't the only husband who had gotten that message. Dinner was normal. Too normal. The kind of carefully orchestrated scene where everything looks perfect on the surface, but underneath, something is off. The wives were laughing, leaning into their husbands like nothing had changed, sipping wine, sharing stories, touching our hands. But I couldn't stop looking at Emma. Every glance, every smile, every time she reached for me. Was it real? Had it always been real? Or had I been blind this entire time? I wasn't the only one. I caught Ryan shifting in his chair, his jaw tense, his eyes scanning his wife, Sophie, like he was seeing her for the first time. He had been married longer than the rest of us, and he usually never questioned her. But tonight, he was quiet, watching, just like me. Then, the second text arrived. You're not the only one asking questions. Find the others. My grip tightened around my phone, a slow chill creeping into my chest. Others. I glanced around the table, trying to figure out which of the men had gotten the same message, who was hiding the same suspicion in their eyes. Then, Ryan reached for his phone. A brief flicker of shock crossed his face before he shoved it back into his pocket, his fingers tightening around the stem of his wine glass. He got one too. I met his gaze across the table. He knew. But neither of us said a word. The night stretched on, the conversations floating around us feeling distant, like background noise. Emma's hand was warm against my arm, her laughter soft in my ear, but I wasn't really hearing it anymore. I was thinking about that message. Find the others. How many of us had been warned? And what were we supposed to find? The opportunity came when dinner ended, and the group naturally splintered off. The women moved toward the patio, still sipping their drinks, while the men lingered behind, pretending we weren't waiting for a chance to talk alone. Finally, Ryan set his glass down with just enough force to make a point. We need to talk, he muttered. We stepped onto the back terrace, away from the glowing lanterns and the laughter of our wives, the ocean stretching black and endless beyond the edge of the property. The moment we were alone, Ryan exhaled sharply. "You got one too, didn't you?" I nodded. "Right before dinner." "Me too," he said, his jaw tight. "And I don't like what it's implying." Before I could respond, another voice joined us. "What's going on?" I turned to see Jason standing a few feet away, his phone still in his hand, his expression shadowed. He knew. I exhaled slowly. "You got the message too?" Jason nodded. "And I want to know who the hell sent it." That made 3 of us. The only one missing was Mark, the last husband, the one who always played it cool, the one who never let anything get under his skin. But when he stepped outside a moment later, his face was pale. And he didn't even need to ask what we were talking about. He just held up his phone. His message was identical. We stood there in silence for a moment, the truth sinking in. This wasn't random. We weren't being paranoid. Someone was trying to warn us. Ryan was the first to say what we were all thinking. What the hell is going on with our wives? No one had an answer, but we were about to find one, and none of us were ready for it. We stood there in the dark, the sound of the ocean crashing against the cliffs below, the distant laughter of our wives carrying from the patio, and none of us spoke for a long moment. Because we all knew the same thing now. We weren't imagining this. Something was happening. Someone wanted us to know, and none of us were ready for the answer. Mark was the first to break the silence, running a hand through his hair, his phone still gripped tight. "Okay," he muttered. "Let's not jump to conclusions. These messages could be some kind of prank." Ryan scoffed. "Yeah? By who? Who even has our numbers? And why would someone send the same message to all of us?" Jason shifted, his jaw tense. "It's not a prank. Whoever's sending these knows something we don't." I glanced toward the patio, my stomach twisting. Or maybe something we're not supposed to find out. None of us wanted to say it. That our wives were hiding something. But the truth sat between us like a bomb waiting to go off. I turned back to the group. "We need proof," I said. "If this is real, if something's actually going on, we have to find out what." Mark exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "And how exactly do we do that? Ask them?" Ryan shook his head. "No. If they are hiding something, they'll just lie." Jason looked toward the house, his expression unreadable. "We don't ask," he said. "We watch." The plan was simple. We'd wait until the wives were asleep. Then, we'd check their phones, their messages, their calls, anything that told us what was really happening. I hated the idea of snooping through Emma's things, hated that we had even reached this point, but I couldn't ignore the feeling crawling up my spine, the way everything suddenly felt wrong. Something was happening, and I needed to know what. The night stretched on. We went back inside, pretending nothing had changed, pretending we weren't all thinking the same thing, and the women didn't notice. Or maybe they were just better at hiding things than we thought. Emma curled into me in bed, her breath warm against my skin, her body fitting against mine like it always had. If I hadn't seen the message, if I hadn't felt that shift in her, I would have thought everything was fine. That's how good she was at lying. I waited until her breathing slowed, until her body softened, until I was sure she was asleep. Then, carefully, I slid out of bed, moving as quietly as possible, my pulse hammering as I reached for her phone on the nightstand. Locked. Not surprising. But I knew the passcode. Or at least, I thought I did. I typed in the usual numbers. Denied. My chest tightened. She had changed it. Recently. Without telling me. That alone was enough to make my stomach turn. A soft vibration in my pocket made me jump. A text from Ryan. "Meet in the hallway." I exhaled slowly, placed Emma's phone back, and slipped out of the room. The others were already there, their faces pale in the dim light. "They all changed their passwords," Jason muttered. Mark nodded. "Same here." Ryan's jaw was tight. "Mine too. For wives. For locked phones. All changed recently." None of us spoke for a moment, the weight of it settling over us. Then, Jason's voice cut through the silence. "Then we check the one thing they can't lock." I frowned. "What?" He glanced toward the living room. "Their GPS history." We moved quickly, our steps silent as we slipped downstairs and accessed the home system. The resort had smart controls, allowing us to pull up connected devices, location tracking. I didn't know what we expected to find, but when Jason pulled up the logs, my breath caught in my throat. They had all been somewhere last night. Together. Without us. And not just anywhere. They had been in the villa on the far side of the resort. A villa none of us had ever seen before. Ryan's hand curled into a fist. What the hell were they doing there? No one answered. Because deep down, we already knew. We just didn't want to believe it. None of us spoke as we stared at the screen, at the blinking dots marking the exact location where our wives had been last night. A place we hadn't been told about. A place none of us had set foot in. Jason was the first to move, shutting down the interface and shoving his phone into his pocket, his voice tight. We go now. No hesitation. No second-guessing. Ryan nodded, his jaw locked, the tension radiating off him like a live wire. Mark exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair before giving a slow nod. We find out what the hell they're hiding. My pulse hammered, but I didn't argue. Because I needed to know. We moved fast, slipping out of the villa into the night, our steps silent against the stone path. The resort was quiet, the guests long asleep. The only sound the distant crash of the ocean against the cliffs. The villa we were heading towards sat at the farthest edge of the property, separate from the others, secluded. Private. That alone sent a slow, creeping sensation up my spine. Why would they need a place like this? Jason led the way, his fingers twitching at his sides like he was barely holding himself together. Ryan stayed close behind him, his breathing heavy but controlled, like he was bracing himself for impact. Mark was quieter, his expression unreadable, but I could see the tension in the way his fists clenched at his sides. None of us wanted to believe what we were walking toward, but deep down, we all knew. The villa loomed ahead, its sleek glass windows reflecting the moonlight, the structure more modern, more designed for exclusivity. I swallowed hard, my hands tightening into fists as we reached the front door. No security, no locks. Like whoever used it never expected to be caught. Jason pushed it open without hesitation, and what we saw stopped us cold. The air inside was thick with the scent of perfume, of wine, of something else, something intimate. The dim lighting cast soft shadows over the space, sleek furniture, luxurious decor, but my eyes were drawn to the centerpiece of the room. A long, low glass table. On it, 4 empty wine glasses. 4. The tension in my chest twisted into something sharp, something suffocating. Ryan moved first, stepping forward, picking up one of the glasses with slow, deliberate movements. His knuckles were white. They were here, he muttered, voice low, strained. Jason's jaw tightened as he scanned the room, his body tense, his mind working through the same questions we all had. Who were they here with? And why? Then, Mark exhaled sharply. Over here. We turned. He stood near the couch, his expression dark as he lifted something from the cushions. A silk robe. A woman's robe. My stomach flipped as he turned it in his hands, and my breath stalled completely when I saw the embroidered initials on the collar. E.L. Emma Lawson. My wife. I took a slow, measured step forward, my entire body numb, my mind barely able to process what I was looking at. She had been here. And if her robe was here, that meant, no. I forced the thought down, forced my breathing to stay even, forced myself to keep moving. We needed more. We needed proof. Jason reached for his phone, scanning the area, opening the villa's smart system, pulling up any connected devices. There has to be something, he muttered, his fingers moving fast. Cameras, logs, anything. I barely heard him. My mind was spinning, replaying every moment of this trip, every touch, every smile, every glance our wives had exchanged when they thought we weren't looking. Had this been the plan all along? The screen flickered. Then, video playback. The tension in the room snapped. Jason didn't hesitate. He pressed play. The footage was grainy, low resolution, but it was enough. Enough to see 4 figures enter the villa. Our wives. Laughing, talking, waiting. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched them settle in, as I saw Emma pour the wine, as I saw Sophie pull her hair over one shoulder, as I saw Lauren lean back against the couch, her smile easy, relaxed. Too comfortable. Too at home. Like they had done this before. Then, the door in the video opened again, and someone else stepped inside. The screen flickered, the distortion scrambling the figure's face for a second before it cleared. A man. Tall. Confident. Unfamiliar. Mark swore under his breath. Ryan went completely still. Jason's breathing sharpened. My pulse was a roar in my ears. Who the hell was he? And then, the video ended. The screen went black. A soft ping echoed in the silence. My phone. A new message. Now you see it. But do you want to know the truth? I stared at the screen, my fingers ice cold, because I already knew the answer. The room felt like it was closing in. My pulse hammered as I stared at the message on my phone, the weight of those words sinking into my chest like a stone. Now you see it. But do you want to know the truth? I already knew the answer. We all did. Jason was still locked on the frozen screen. His jaw clenched so tight, I thought he might snap a tooth. Mark had gone pale, his hands twitching at his sides like he was barely holding himself together. Ryan stood perfectly still, his breathing sharp and measured, his entire body coiled with tension. No one moved. No one spoke. Because this was it. The moment we either walked away or went all the way in. Jason broke first. His voice was low, barely controlled. Play the next file. I hesitated, my stomach twisting, but my fingers were already moving, navigating through the system, finding the next recorded clip. My hand shook as I pressed play. The screen flickered, the grainy footage loading slowly, and then the room in the video came to life. Our wives. Sitting on the couch, their bodies close, their movements fluid and familiar. Emma leaned toward Sophie, whispering something that made her laugh. Lauren poured more wine. Leah tucked her legs beneath her, looking completely at ease. They were comfortable here. Too comfortable. Like they had done this before. Like this wasn't new. Then, the door opened again. He walked in. The same man from the first clip. Taller than all of us. Broad shoulders. Dark hair. Charismatic. There was something about him that made my skin crawl. Something in the way he carried himself, the way the women looked at him. Like they knew him. Like they were waiting for him. My heart pounded as I watched the scene unfold, my breath catching when Emma smiled at him in a way she never smiled at me anymore. A slow, familiar, knowing smile. And he smiled back. Jason exhaled sharply. Who the hell is he? Mark's voice was strained. Wait, listen. The footage had no audio, but the resort system had recorded transcripts. The text logs loaded beside the video, and as I skimmed the words, my stomach dropped. Emma, same rules as last time? Man, of course. No attachments. No regrets. Just fun. Sophie, and no one finds out? Man, they never have before. My blood ran ice cold. Ryan cursed under his breath, turning away, his hands braced against the edge of the table like he was trying to keep himself from punching something. Jason's entire body tensed, his breathing sharp and uneven. Mark let out a slow, shaky exhale, rubbing his face like he could scrub the words out of his head. But they were there, written in black and white. Same rules as last time. This wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern, a system, a game. And we had been clueless. I felt sick, physically sick. I turned away from the screen, my mind spinning, my heart slamming into my ribs so hard it hurt. They had been doing this behind our backs. Meeting with him, with whoever the hell he was, setting rules like it was some kind of contract, laughing and drinking and what? My hands shook. How far had this gone? How long had they been lying? Jason's voice was tight, clipped, deadly. We find out who he is. He was already moving, already scanning the system, pulling up guest logs, trying to match his face to a name. I wasn't sure I wanted to know, but I had no choice. None of us did. Ryan inhaled sharply, forcing his hands to steady before he spoke. And then what? Jason didn't answer. Because none of us knew. The search loaded. One name appeared. Derek Whitmore. The air in the room shifted. The name meant nothing to me. But to Mark? His face drained of color. His breath hitched. And for the first time since we got here, he looked afraid. Ryan narrowed his eyes. Who is he? Mark didn't answer right away. He just swallowed hard, shaking his head, his entire body going rigid. And then, finally, he spoke. "He's my brother." The words hit like a bomb. Jason froze. Ryan's head snapped toward him. I felt my stomach twist into something sharp and painful. Brother? Mark had never mentioned a brother. Not once in all the years we'd known him. Why? Jason's voice was low, dangerous. "Mark, what the hell is going on?" Mark inhaled shakily, his hands pressing into his temples like he was trying to force himself to think. "Derek, he's always been like this. The charming one. The one who could make anyone fall for him. The problem is," he hesitated, his jaw tight. "He doesn't stop until he gets what he wants." I could barely breathe. And what does he want? Mark's expression darkened. To win. Jason's fists clenched. Win what? Mark exhaled slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "The game." Silence. Then my phone buzzed again. "You're getting closer. But are you ready to lose?" I stared at the message, my blood running cold. Because this wasn't just about our wives anymore. It was about us. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, as Mark's words sank in. The game. My hands curled into fists, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs, the words bouncing around my skull, refusing to settle. Jason was the first to move, stepping closer, his voice tight with barely restrained anger. "You knew," he said. "You knew this whole damn time." Mark shook his head quickly, his expression twisted, his hands raised like he was trying to defend himself from the weight of our accusations. "No," he said sharply. "I didn't. Not until now." Ryan scoffed, his voice sharp, cutting. "Bullshit." Mark exhaled, his jaw tight, his gaze flickering toward the dark screen where we had just watched the proof of our wives' betrayal unfold. "I swear to you, I didn't know they were involved," he muttered. "But Derek, he's done this before." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What do you mean?" Mark ran a hand through his hair, pacing now, his movements jerky, anxious. "Derek likes to play games," he muttered. "Always has. He finds people, couples, groups, and he pulls them apart." My breath stalled, a sick realization twisting in my gut. "For what?" Mark's expression darkened. "Because he can." The weight of it was crushing. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the table, my mind scrambling to piece everything together. This wasn't random. This wasn't just an affair. This was a game, a system, a carefully orchestrated manipulation. "How long has he been doing this?" Jason demanded. Mark exhaled. "Years," he admitted. "He finds a way in, finds weaknesses, watches, waits. Then he starts pushing. He turns people against each other. And in the end?" His throat bobbed. "He wins." Ryan's voice was quiet but deadly. "And what the hell does winning look like?" Mark hesitated. Then, finally, he spoke. "The ones who play never come back the same." A chill ran through me. Jason swore under his breath, turning away, his hands braced on his hips, his body wound so tightly I thought he might explode. "So what the hell do we do now?" Mark looked at him, something unreadable in his expression. "We stop him," he said, "before it's too late." A soft ping echoed in the room. My phone. Again. I swallowed hard, dread pooling in my stomach as I lifted the screen. Too late. My pulse stopped. Then, another ping. A new message. A link. I clicked it before I could think, before I could hesitate, before I could stop myself. The screen loaded, a live security feed flickering onto my phone. My breath caught. The wives. They were in the villa. Right now. And Derek was with them. We ran. No hesitation, no discussion, no second-guessing. We bolted from the villa, moving as one, our feet pounding against the stone path as the cold night air sliced against our skin. My breath came fast and uneven, my thoughts a chaotic mess, my body operating on pure instinct. Derek had them. He had planned this. He had been waiting for us to figure it out, waiting for the moment we'd come running. And now we were playing directly into his hands. Jason was ahead of me, his fists clenched so tightly I could see the tension in his shoulders even in the dim light. Ryan was muttering curses under his breath, his entire body wound tight with barely contained fury. Mark was silent, his face pale, his eyes dark with something unreadable. Because this was his brother. And deep down, I think he knew that this wouldn't end the way we wanted it to. The villa came into view, its sleek windows glowing in the night, the shadows of movement flickering inside. My stomach twisted as I saw them. Emma, Sophie, Leah, Lauren, sitting together in the living room, wine glasses in hand, their laughter soft, relaxed. Too relaxed. Like they had no idea what was happening. Like they had no idea that they had already been caught. And then, there he was. Derek, standing near the bar, pouring another drink, his movements smooth, effortless, like he belonged there. Like this wasn't some elaborate betrayal but just another night among friends. Like he hadn't just destroyed everything. My fists curled so tight my nails bit into my palms, rage flaring through me like wildfire. I wanted to storm inside, to grab Emma, to demand answers, to tear Derek apart for whatever sick game he had been playing. But before I could move, Mark's hand shot out, gripping my wrist. Wait. His voice was low, urgent, his eyes locked on the scene inside. I turned to him sharply, barely holding myself together. What the hell are we waiting for? Mark swallowed hard, his face tight. They don't look scared, he said slowly. I frowned, my pulse slamming against my ribs as I looked back inside. He was right. They weren't tense, weren't uncomfortable, weren't showing any signs of distress. They looked happy, like they wanted to be there. Like this was normal. Like this had been normal for a long time. The realization hit me hard, a sickening weight settling in my gut. They knew, I muttered, the words barely a whisper. They knew the whole time. Jason let out a sharp exhale, his body going rigid beside me. They weren't tricked, he said coldly. They were part of it. The truth slammed into me, knocking the air from my lungs. The messages hadn't been a warning. They had been a test. A breadcrumb trail designed to see if we would figure it out, if we would put the pieces together. And now that we had walked straight into the trap. Derek turned. His eyes met mine through the window, and he smirked. I moved before I could think, before I could stop myself, yanking open the door so hard it slammed against the wall. The laughter stopped. The wives turned, their faces shifting from amusement to something else, something unreadable. Derek didn't move. He just stood there, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his drink, his expression perfectly calm. Like he had been expecting this. Like he had been waiting. Ryan was next to me in an instant, his breathing sharp and uneven, his entire body coiled with rage. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "What the hell have you done?" Sophie blinked, her head tilting slightly, confusion flickering across her face. "Ryan, what?" "Don't," he snapped. "Don't act like you don't know." Emma stood slowly, her eyes locked on me, something in them that made my chest tighten. "Ethan," she said softly, "you need to calm down." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Calm down?" My voice cracked. "You've been lying to me. To all of us. And you want me to calm down?" She exhaled, glancing at the other women, as if exchanging some silent message, as if she was still keeping secrets, even now. Then, Derek spoke. "Sit down," he said smoothly, his voice filled with quiet authority, like he was already in control, like he had been the whole time. "Let's talk." Jason let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. "You think we're just gonna sit here and let you explain whatever sick game this is?" Derek smiled, slow and easy. "You don't have a choice." The door behind us clicked shut, locked. I barely had time to register it before Derek stepped forward, setting his glass down, his expression unreadable. "You think you've figured it out," he said. "You think you know what's going on." He glanced at Mark. "But you don't, do you?" Mark swallowed hard, his hands twitching at his sides, but he didn't speak. Derek exhaled, shaking his head slightly, as if disappointed. "This isn't just a game," he said, his gaze sweeping across each of us. "This is the game." His eyes locked onto mine, his smirk returning. "And you just lost." A soft ping. Our phones. I pulled mine out, my stomach twisting as I read the message. "Congratulations. You played well." But the wives chose differently. Game over. My breath caught. Jason cursed under his breath. Ryan's hands shook. Mark just closed his eyes. Emma exhaled softly, stepping toward me, reaching for my hand, her expression almost sad. "Ethan," she whispered. I jerked away, because I finally understood. It hadn't been Derek's game. It had been theirs. And we were never supposed to win. The silence in the room was unbearable. The only sound was the distant crash of waves against the cliffs outside. But inside, everything was still. I felt frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts as I stared at Emma, at my wife, at the woman who had just admitted, without words, without hesitation, that she had been playing me, that this had never been a betrayal to her. Because this was the plan all along. My fingers curled into fists, my body tense, every muscle coiled tight, but I didn't move. I couldn't, because I didn't know what to do now. I had come here thinking I was going to expose a lie, thinking I was about to uncover some twisted affair, but the truth was so much worse. Derek stepped forward, slow and controlled, his presence too confident, too easy, like he had already won, like he had always been in control of this moment. "Breathe, Ethan," he murmured, his voice smooth. "I know it's a lot to process." I clenched my teeth, my breath sharp. "Shut up." His smirk deepened. "Still in denial? That's understandable." His gaze swept across the room, lingering on Jason, Ryan, Mark, all of us standing there, all of us caught in the same trap. "You thought you were investigating a betrayal," he continued, shaking his head slightly. "You thought you were catching them in a lie. But the truth?" He chuckled, low and amused. "They were never lying. They just weren't telling you the parts you didn't want to hear." Ryan exhaled sharply, shaking his head, his hands clenched at his sides. "You're saying they chose this?" His voice cracked slightly. "That this wasn't manipulation? This wasn't you playing them?" Derek raised an eyebrow. "Who said I played them?" He glanced toward Sophie, toward Leah, toward Lauren, then finally back at Emma. The way his expression shifted, like he was certain of something we weren't. Then Emma spoke, her voice too soft. "We weren't tricked, Ryan," she said. "We weren't forced into anything." She took a slow breath, her fingers twisting together. "We wanted this." Jason snapped. He moved so fast I barely saw it, lunging for Derek, his hand grabbing the front of his shirt, shoving him back against the bar so hard the glass behind him rattled. "You smug piece of..." But Derek didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't even fight back. He just smiled, like he knew Jason wouldn't go through with it. And he was right. Jason's hands trembled, his breath coming hard and uneven, his entire body shaking with rage. But after a long moment, he let go. He stepped back, his fists clenching at his sides, his chest rising and falling with sharp, broken breaths. Derek smoothed out his shirt, his smirk unwavering. "Feel better?" Jason turned away, exhaling sharply, his hands pressed against the counter. Ryan looked sick. Mark looked broken. I felt nothing, just a hollow, gnawing emptiness spreading through my chest, like my entire world had collapsed in on itself and left me standing in the wreckage. "So what now?" My voice sounded foreign, distant. "What's the endgame, Derek? You've already won. You already took everything. What the hell do you want from us now?" Derek tilted his head slightly, studying me, then smiled. "Nothing," he said simply. "The game is over." He stepped back, nodding toward the wives, the way they stood together, calm, not guilty, not ashamed. "They made their choice. Now you have to make yours." I swallowed hard, my mind spinning. Choice. Emma stepped closer. Too close. "You can walk away," she said softly. "No drama. No fighting. Just acceptance." Her voice was gentle, but the words cut through me like a knife. Acceptance. Acceptance that this wasn't a mistake. That she hadn't just fallen into something. That she had wanted this. Chosen it. Over me. My chest felt too tight. "And if I don't?" My voice was low. "What happens then?" Derek's smirk returned. "Then you're just another sore loser." I inhaled sharply, my vision blurring, my pulse roaring in my ears. I could feel Jason tensing beside me, Ryan struggling to breathe, Mark staring at his wife like he didn't even recognize her anymore. Walk away? Stay? What the hell did that even mean? It wasn't really a choice, was it? We had already lost. I looked at Emma one last time. At the woman I had built my life with. The woman who had just told me she didn't want it anymore. Then I turned and walked out the door. And one by one, the others followed.